Today, I'm glad to be speaking with Dave Wakeman, the guy that American Express called the king of tickets. He's got an amazing story, very inspiring stories. You'll learn different ideas, what to work on, revenue, how to deal with change, and most importantly, get inspiring stories that I'm sure will inspire yourself. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. You know, I try to bring interesting guests all the time, and today you're in for a treat. Dave Wakeman is a star in the ticketing industry, in the entertainment. He had been advising companies like American Express, and not only American Express, the Centurion card of American Express. He worked with brands like Yellowtail. Amex call him the king of tickets. He's got an awesome podcast called The Business of Fun. Dave, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. With an introduction like that, I think I should just let you talk. I'm going to just sit here and listen to you tell me how awesome I am. I appreciate that.
I had to pick some of the points in your bio. It's so impressive. And the most impressive that people would not know, and I discovered that with you, it's your story. And it started with nightclubs.
Oh, yeah. I have, you're in Boca now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I started out opening nightclubs back in the mid-90s with an in Fort Lauderdale in Broward County on Commercial Boulevard, which is now a beautiful bank where the nightclub used to be. But it was a location of one of the most famous nightclubs in the history because it had the floor that was from Saturday Night Fever in it. And now I'm forgetting the name of the club that was there before us, but the location was famous. It was on Commercial just east of Federal Highway. So we opened some nightclubs all over the country. So Fort Lauderdale, really Oakland Park, I guess that's Fort Lauderdale, Houston, Chicago, and St. Louis. And, and then that led me to the one in St. Louis not doing very well. It led me to one of my really great opportunities of my career, which was I moved to Seattle not knowing anyone, not knowing anything, and having about $600 in my pocket. And I got a job working for Paul Allen, who helped start Microsoft with Bill Gates. And helped open the Experience Music Project, which is now called Mopop. It's on the grounds of the Seattle Center. And that's sort of where I found a love and a ability, or I always had a love for marketing, but I found out that I had a good ability at it as well. And so that kind of has led me all over the place. So I've had the chance to move to New York and work with a company called Americana Tickets. And that's where I kind of did some stuff with American Express and the Centurion card, which was help them figure out how to distribute and buy tickets for their clients all over the world. Yellowtail Wines and their ad agency, Tipton and Maglione. We pulled together, I think it was 36 cities where we threw tailgate parties at 36 cities. And it was one of the key ingredients to help Yellowtail get into Costco. And from one year, the year before to the year after we did these parties, they grew like 636%. And that was one of the key aspects of that. It was a really great program. I've worked with Coca-Cola on the launch of the Odwalla product to the endurance athlete community. I worked on the efforts to support the Affordable Care Act in America. I worked to help get President Obama reelected in 2012. I have had a chance to go to Australia and speak to the Australian Football League, the Victoria Racing Club, the Sydney Opera House. That's
amazing.
I've been to every continent now, I think. So that's like a short story, but it was long in my head but it's been great, and it all started with nightclubs, which I think for somebody who's focusing on meetings, it's really relevant. It's a lot of relevant experience.
It is. And before even the relevancy for meetings or a ticketing industry, what I love listening to people like you, and this is why I love America, you're not confined in one type of job or one function, on one job description. You can change. You can go from one sector to another. One thing, though, that I see, and that's how you position yourself, I think very cleverly, as the revenue architect, is that there's that trend about looking at revenue, because there's a lot of people working in nightclubs, a lot of people working with Coca-Cola, with Yellowtail, with Amex, but you seem to be like the light that goes and say, oh, this is what we can be doing, innovative, and bring new solution. how did you learn that? And how is that come to you in your life?
Okay. So this will be another long story or longish story. Not really. What it was I grew up in northern Georgia near Athens, and I was the first person in my family to go to college. I was the first person in my family to always have indoor plumbing. So like my mom, my aunt, they had to use outhouses when they were kids. So, so that's like an interesting thing, because I think you don't remember, or you don't think about these things as being like, you think of them in the distant past.
Right.
And so to say I came from something that would be modest would be a bit of, would be very generous to my background. Completely loved by my family and everything, but we didn't have a lot of money. So I realized pretty early on that the way to make something of yourself was through your ability to generate money, to market and sell effectively. And so I've always gravitated towards those things. I think it was just because it was a natural need to, if I wanted to get out of northern Georgia, I need to be able to know how to market and sell. And so over the years, I've been developed an eye for things that people will look for and they find value in. And I understand that if you are able to create enough value for your customers or for the people you're aiming to serve, then you should be able to collect some of that for yourself. And if you do that over and over and over again, you can create a pretty great career for yourself. The fact that I did it all the time, though, and that it was such a natural thing to me, I didn't actually realize I did it so well or did it so consistently until probably almost 5 or 6 years ago. And my accountant said, you know what, you are more than anything. He's like, you're the revenue architect. And that's where the name came from. So Don Franklin gets the, credit for that, because he was like, on everywhere you go and everything you work on, their revenue grows. Like, even if that's not the intention, you are like the missing ingredient for money. So I like to say, like, I just have like gold doubloons that fall out of my pocket everywhere I go.
That's awesome. And you also have beautiful stories of creating unique experiences in LA with artists and very well-known people.
Oh, yes. Well, that's been a big part of it, because I think if you come from nightclubs, and then if you do stuff with like the Experience Music Project, and you do all kinds of different things, you get a chance to work with some really great people. One of the things that I'm most proud of is, something I'm working on currently. I don't know when the podcast is going to go up, but I imagine it's going to be before November. So, yeah. So you'll have a chance to check this out. But it's at www.ivotedconcerts.com, or hashtag on Twitter, ivotedconcerts. And it's this great thing with people from, I believe one of the founders is some of the band members from Wilco. So a great American rock band based out of Chicago, In Living Color, and a bunch of other great artists that the names are slipping to me right now, but it's to support getting people registered and getting people to vote. And so the thing is if you take a picture of you with your, your mail-in ballot or at the polling place, we'll invite you to a concert, as a virtual concert. Usually they're live, but this year they'll be virtual. That's one great thing. We put together some really, really great concerts at the Experience Music Project. So I had a chance to work with the folks from, Joe Strummer from The Clash, or Sheryl Crow, Modest Mouse, the guys from REM, the guys from Pearl Jam. I've had a chance to work with some of those. And then one of the things, because a lot of times I will use my expertise and do things for nonprofits to help them, either if they couldn't afford somebody like me, or if they have something new they're trying to do or innovative. But last year I worked with an organization called EB Research Partnership. And it's a skin disease called Epididymis isis paloma. And it's really rare, but it's like, so if we have 7 layers of skin, these kids have maybe 1 or 2. So it's like they walk through life with burns on them. And so they have, one of their founding members is a guy called Eddie Vedder, and his wife, Jill. So I by getting the fan club newsletter from Pearl Jam, I recognized what they were working on, and they had an opportunity to be a part of the We Day program, which was really great. It exposed them to an international audience, and it brought a whole new level of awareness to the organization that had not been there before. And so, so like these kind of events and opportunities, they've come up, over and over throughout the years. And I think it's just it's a function of recognizing that I understand what the value of a program is,
right?
Why people want to be involved in it, and then understand how to get people involved in it. So it becomes a really nice way for me to give back and for me to help people have a bigger impact and do really some good stuff in the world.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. And when you say revenue is a process,
Oh, yeah.
whether you're in ticketing or in meetings and events, is there a process that you can always apply regardless of what you do, regardless of the size of your company? Is that a mindset, or is it something that is different based on the industries?
Well, I don't take a cookie cutter approach to anybody. So that's the first thing. But there are some things that you can look for. And the first thing, if you're trying to create revenue, or if you want to figure out how to even, if you're doing a meeting, how to get for people to have the biggest impact from what they're doing, is you want to focus on what's the value that you're trying to create for people, right? If you're selling something, then that's great. How do you improve someone's life? In a meeting, it could be like, what kind of experience do people want? As the planner, how do you want people to feel when they come in, or each day when they visit you, right? If you're the museum, not the museum, but the hotel, maybe it could be at a museum, because when we were at the Experience Music Project, we had quite a few meeting rooms there. What do you want the entrance to look like? What do you want people to experience when they're engaging with the staff, right? All these things. How do you want people to mingle together? These are all forms of value. And if you've done your job well, either directly or indirectly, those can lead you to revenue. The second part of it is always about focusing on who is the specific person you can help, right? When I'm talking about strategy and I'm talking to people who are in revenue generating roles, I say, hey, who's the customer who's really going to buy this, right? Make sure that you're focusing on the person who can write the check for the value you're creating. And, in a meeting setting, that might be a little bit different, because you probably have some of these events, like thousands of people who are really customers of this thing,
right?
Even though you might not necessarily make the direct relationship with them. And then finally, it's like, how do you reach them? So then that's all marketing. And so like going through that process typically opens up a lot of questions, right? And those questions usually begin with why. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want people to feel that way? And if you are curious about these things and you consistently focus on value, the people you're trying to reach, and how you want to communicate with them, that's the process that I usually lay out. But it's a little bit that's the framework, but it's usually a little more individualized and a little more customized. But if you start with those three questions, you will get a lot further than a lot of businesses do.
So repeat the three questions.
What is the value you are trying to create?
Yes.
Who is the customer that will pay you?
Yep.
And how do you reach those people?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I totally agree with you also when you mentioned about the why of a meeting. It's fascinating to me when I had my cooperative agency back in Belgium, when I would ask a sales director, I said, why do you do this meeting? And say, we do it every year. I'm thinking, oh my God. Now, linking to what you said about the value and Yellowtail, for which you when you mentioned to me that brand, I said, yay! I actually discovered Yellowtail thanks to this amazing book, The Blue Ocean Strategy.
Yeah.
Where they speak about Yellowtail. And there is one of the two elements there, besides the four question matrix, is the value curve. When you set all the features of what you're doing compared to the competition, which aligning your team, it also set direction. You're talking about strategy, and people are talking about tactics, which help execute a strategy. And there's a lot of confusion sometimes. People, when they speak about the strategy, is actually speaking about tactics and vice versa. Right. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. Strategy, simple. Strategy is where you're trying to get to. Tactics is how you get there. It's that, that's the way. And I think people have gotten a little used with language in a lot of ways. And strategy and tactics is one of those, because, people just don't, they haven't come up in an environment where the precision of the language has necessarily needed to be there. So then my belief is, and I could be wrong, is that because there's a lack of precision in the way that you frame and talk about something, it leads you to poorer outcomes. Because if you can't use the right language to describe what you're trying to achieve or what you want to do, then you find yourself in an environment where you can't get the results you're looking for, because you're not asking the right questions, or you're not having the right conversations. And that's a challenge in a lot of industries, not just meetings or not just tickets or not sports. It's across the board. And I believe that part of it is, through no one's fault, is our mindset is often so short-term that we never get a chance to even think about what's the difference between strategy and tactics. So, a lot of times our strategy really is a day-to-day thing. And like, how can I just have some sort of impact or get through the day? And unfortunately, that leads to poor outcomes.
Totally agree. I like many of your stories, but one, if you can explain a little bit more how you became the king of tickets for American Centurion, the black card, because in those days, obviously now it's a disaster for our industry. There's a lot of people that are being furloughed, laid off, but we're going to come back. That we know. We don't know when, but we know we're going to come back. The question will always be, how do you demonstrate value, and how do you make sure that people perceive the value that you're bringing? So how did you become the king of tickets for the black card of American Express?
Okay. So first thing you brought up, it's a really terrible time for people in tickets, entertainment, sports, all these things, events. People will come back. We don't know when. It's the Stockdale paradox. We have to understand that this is a terrible time. It sucks, but that doesn't allow us to give up. So I want everybody to remember this, because that's helped me get through a lot of days lately.
Agree.
But back to how I became the king of tickets. So this is sort of, it gets me, how do the British say it? It gets me a lot of stick for this nickname. But it was completely legit, because so American Express has the Centurion card, which is the black card. And it is probably the most prestigious credit card you can have. And so for a long time, they had been working to figure out a way to deliver the highest, American Express level of customer service around ticket acquisition. And so this had been going on. Now I find out a few years back, like 10 years before I ever became involved, they would work with people. They were never quite happy with it. And so then we met each other, and I was able to deliver that level of service, because my thing was always like, if I can create enough value for you, then I'm going to collect more than my fair share of value in return, right? So you have to give to get kind of philosophy. And so one day, I don't remember exactly what happened, but there was, I believe it was, they had a really super, so everybody's a VIP in the Centurion card. So they had somebody who within that program was a VIP. So a VIP of VIPs. And the person needed 2 tickets to Wicked on Broadway when Wicked was super, super hot, right? Like 2004, 2005. And it was one of those times when the show was like a holiday weekend. You couldn't get a ticket anywhere in the world, right? And I was like, I'm going to get you those pair of tickets. And I was able to get them the pair of tickets. And it was like C1 and 3 on the aisle, on the center aisle, about 5 rows from the stage, because that was the kind of guy I was at the time. And the boss, she was like, you're the king of tickets. And that was like the thing. So I took it and ran with it.
They never found the 2 other buddies?
Well, I'm sorry?
They never found the buddies of the people that you had to kill to get those 2 tickets?
Right. Hey, look, people ask, well, why were you so successful? And I go, it was really I was lucky, right? Like a lot of things in life, people discount luck. I was lucky. And what it was I had a great ability to build relationships with people. I think that's probably something that you would say that I'm not overstating, because
absolutely,
I know people all over the place.
Yeah.
But I was also able to take that relationship building aspect and then have technology that would allow me to be able to connect with people easier, right? So the internet and e-commerce became a bigger part of the environment around the time I started working with American Express. And so the combination of my personal skills, interpersonal skills, and the technology that allowed me to figure out who I needed to find or who I needed to connect with was the combination that helped me unlock that thing. So the fact that they had struggled to get it exactly to the level that American Express demands something, and that I was doing, it was like, the right place at the right time. And it was a combination of my personal skills, which everybody work on your personal skills and relationships. It's not BS. It's the super most important thing you do.
Agree. Yeah,
using
absolutely.
Technology as a way to help, expand on those and build off of those. Then that was like, the really like killer secret to why I was so successful then.
I fully agree with you. That I have many stories that ended well because of the relationship, even before a contract or anything. For another time, but I remember the World Cup 1998 in Paris, where I had to find 20 top VIP tickets for Café de Colombia, Juan Valdez. And again, relationship was absolutely crucial.
Right.
Yeah.
You do whatever you want to if you have the right relationships. I mean, people, they open doors.
And those relationships kind of, people would look at it and say maybe it's serendipity in your life, but actually it's everything you've been doing from the nightclubs, from the consulting with the various companies and bringing everything together.
Well, that's absolutely right. It's, I think sometimes, and this is probably a good lesson for people in meetings, is you often, I mean, the barrier of entry to any industry is that you got to know what you're doing. Yeah. I mean, so we all at a certain point have a certain amount of technical proficiency, some more than others. Because I would say that, like, as far as my technical proficiency around marketing and selling, I'm decent. I'm a pretty good marketer, and I'm an okay salesman. My key skill, though, is the fact that I can build relationships with people and I can have conversations with them that will help them understand what we need to do. Because for the most part, the how of getting something done is pretty straightforward. And there's a lot of people who are technical experts or experts of certain aspects of meetings or marketing and sales that can probably do certain aspects of these things so much better than I can. But the ability to build a relationship and help people see the vision of how something can be better or greater or have a bigger impact, that's where I win all of my business. That's where I win have won all my business over the years. And that's not replicable, right? So as we're talking about things being more and more commoditized and more uncertain for people, your ability to be you is not replaceable, right? Absolutely. And so invest in having a point of view, invest in relationships, invest in finding ways to create value for the people you serve. Those aren't going to go away. Those aren't replaceable, because there's never going to be anybody that's going to see the world exactly the same way you are.
Absolutely. And that's something that I keep repeating for years. For all the people in the meetings and event industry, we're sometimes too focused on logistics only. And don't get me wrong, logistics has to be perfect. Imagine having a concert or where the roof is leaking or it's too cold, the sun is bad, whatever. But we're too much, because it's like a comfort zone, instead of looking at first, what is the value that I'm creating for my customers? And what is the strategic partnership aspect that I can enforce there? And that will change, I think, as well with everything we're seeing now. You would need to demonstrate more and more your value. So I know you're talking about change and how we need to embrace change, or we're going to be run over it. What is your take on what's going on now, and what should people, whether in ticketing or meetings and event industry, what should people do today to prepare themselves for when we're going to fully reopen everything?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there, because change is constant, right? And I think this thing I highlighted in Sydney, Australia, which I think we the two ladies that had me come to speak, I think we know them both the same, with Joe Michelle and Angela Higgins. And so they were like, Dave, we want you to come to Australia. We want you to tell people about change. And so I think I mentioned it to you. If I didn't, I'm going to tell a story here that I use pretty regularly now, which is how did I kind of propel myself forward, or how did I recognize the power of change? And so, again, you're in South Florida, so this will mean something to you.
Right.
But Pat Riley became the head coach and the president of the Miami Heat in July of 1995. I was, at the time, I think I was 21 years old, directionless, and completely not sure how to make my way in the world. And Pat Riley came, and he blew the doors off the building, because he's Pat Riley, and he's to me still one of the most inspirational people I've ever seen. But the real power came in October, when they started preparing for the season, maybe September, and they started running commercials, because at the time the Heat were not what they are now. They had nothing, right? Pat Riley was the biggest coup ever for the Miami Heat. And so Pat Riley was the one who was doing the commercials to sell the tickets. And he told the story, and he did a commercial, and it was, kind of like I am now, kind of in the shadows and bright on one side. And Pat Riley goes, change. The only thing that's certain in life is change. And when she rears her beautiful face, you must embrace her, because change is the only thing that you have. And I don't know what it was about this, but 27 years later, it's still stuck with me. I guess it's 25 years. And what it did though was it showed me that change was coming no matter what. And that like just sitting around and waiting for change to impact me was a loser's bet. Mm. And it made me realize that like I might not necessarily get things right, but change was coming anyway. So I may as well take a shot.
Yeah.
And so as people are sitting here now 6 months into this pandemic, and for the people who I'll be talking to on your podcast or people that I'm typically talking to on my podcast, there's not necessarily any end in sight, right? That we can really, really point to in a lot of places. And it's scary. It's uncertain. It's frustrating. It's every emotion that you probably can, a negative emotion you can put a voice to. Early during the pandemic, I learned though that this idea, and I don't remember exactly where, but that just because I don't know when this is going to end, it doesn't mean I have to give up on my career. And it doesn't mean I have to just throw away my career. I can still focus on the things that I want to focus on to be better. Coming up next week, I think it'll be Monday, I'm going to put it up, is a conversation I had, a great conversation with a friend of mine named Dory Clark, who's written 3 really great books about how to professionally reinvent yourself. Entrepreneurial You, Reinventing You, and Stand Out. And we talk about this exact idea. And so the key is really to look at what you want to do going forward. Because the thing is like you don't have to be the same person you were going into the pandemic. In fact, if you are, that's sort of like, that would be unfortunate because I think the skills and the ideas and the way you approach the world is going to need to change. And so there's not a simple answer, but it's going to begin by looking at who you are and what you want to become, right? You get my tickets newsletter and you'll see this tomorrow, but I write about exactly this idea of what do I want to become? How do I want my business to change? And I said I wanted to focus on strategy and, being even stronger in strategy because I feel like most people get screwed up because their strategy is all tactics and no strategy, right? All, action, no direction. I wanted to use technology to get closer to people, so that's why I've like doubled down on podcasts and I'm on anybody who asks me to do anything, I'm doing it, right? Because I wanted to be able to get my ideas out there in different ways and use technology to do that. And then find ways that I can share my ideas more and more, widely. So I would tell people to think through like 2 or 3 things that you really want to, how you want to have an impact, what you want to do more of, right? Are the things that you want to do going forward the same things you were going to do if things hadn't been disrupted like this?
Yep.
If they aren't, how are you going to, why are you going to continue to do them? Because now is a really good time to stop. So, how are you going to stop and change the directions? What are you going to do? Right. Because if you don't use a pandemic to reinvent yourself and like change everything when you're in an industry that's been hit harder than anybody else, I don't know when you're going to change. And
absolutely,
I don't know if there's a different answer that I can give people.
I love your answer. The different elements to it. That your career is a perfect example of that. Without even talking about the pandemic, definitely the way you changed from one profession to the other with a red line, if you want, into it. But the focus that people have today, instead of having a to-do list, they can start by having a stop list. And that would be something also that can come out of it. I think you're on mute right now. So you're back because I wanted to ask you to reprecise. I love your newsletter. And actually, in all fairness, just discovered recently. I love what you write. Love your podcast, The Business of Fun. How do people can get in touch with you and how could they get your newsletter?
Okay, so I do one that's tickets related, and that may or may not impact people on this that are listening to your podcast. But if they would like to, I'm happy to have them, which is talkingtickets.substack.com. I also do a strategy newsletter on Sundays, which is called The Business of Value. And you can get that at businessofvalue.substack.com. And they're on Substack because I could remember the URLs. So those are, and then you can just search for my name in your favorite podcast platform, and The Business of Fun should come up.
Awesome.
And there's been some really, really great guests because as the pandemic has kind of gone through and there hasn't been as much need for me to talk about like the ins and outs of marketing and selling tickets, I've used it as an opportunity to help people understand their strategy, think differently about how they want to position themselves professionally, how to use technology differently. Some of the things that really should have been top of mind before, but now are really, really even more important.
And you say, even if you're not in the ticketing industry as such, I think that the creativity and the new ideas, you get them by actually reading something that you're not necessarily working in a different field. I remember friends in business that were reading Architect magazine because something will come up in their mind and a different idea. So, I mean, there's so many things we can be discussing. You have so many stories, Dave. I really appreciate you taking the time today. I would like to ask you one last question for now. When we meet in 1 year with a bottle of champagne and, of course, a bottle of Dom Perignon, what will we be celebrating?
Well, hopefully I am going to have finished this book that I have been contracted to write for a while now. Okay. And so, again, I would tell everybody who's listening and following along to definitely push me for this because that would be worth celebrating. Because I think that, as I talked about wanting to do more strategy and wanting to share my ideas more widely and using things, a book's still a great way to share your ideas. It's, at the point, your point, I read so widely, and that's sort of, those collision of ideas from different areas. It's so valuable. And I would encourage people to do that. So when we have our Dom, it will be because I've finished this book that I have to finish.
I keep reminding it to you every time we speak with each other.
That's good. I need that kind of accountability. They tell me that if you want to really get something done, you make yourself accountable in public. So now I'm making myself accountable in public. So we're good.
Dave, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very, very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave Wakeman. Amazing stories. Love how you have been moving from one job to the other, starting with nightclubs, going to American Express, Yellowtail, and really building your consultancy on revenue. If you want to get in touch with me, please go to www.eventbusinessformula.com/group or join me on LinkedIn. Thank you.